My name is Erin Peterson, and my community profile covers the ecology of stream and riparian habitats of the Great Basin region. The Great Basin is made up of most of Nevada, half of Utah, and parts of California, Idaho, Oregon, and Wyoming. I've included a hydrographic map that shows the name of different basin areas within the Great Basin, including the Central, Southern, Lahontan, Northwest, and Bonneville basins. There are three environmental gradients in the Great Basin. The north to south latitudinal gradient extends from about 35 degrees to 44 degrees north latitude. Climate is responsible for the unique features of riparian habitats in this gradient. To the north, there is the highest precipitation, perennial streams are more frequent, and obligate hydrophytes, which are plant species found only in wetlands, dominate. To the south, there are ephemeral and intermittent streams, and facultative hydrophytes. The difference between the streams is their location relative to the water table if you look at the image provided. The ephemeral stream is above the water table, the intermittent stream reaches the seasonal high water table level, and the perennial stream reaches the level of the seasonal low water table. Moving on to the lateral or trans-riparian gradient, this is the stream channel to upland ecosystems gradient, and it's influenced by the hydropattern, the frequency and the intensity of flooding. Lastly, we have the elevational gradient, the river headwaters to the oceanic or basin sink gradient that is influenced by climate and the geomorphic form of river valleys. The climate here is semi-arid to arid. The Sierra Nevada mountains to the west capture moisture from prevailing winds before they reach the region, creating a rain-shadow effect. This area is very diverse in precipitation levels, and it's dependent on the time of year as well. Winter precipitation falls as snow. Summer precipitation falls as isolated, intense showers. Precipitation patterns vary from year to year, but annual temperatures are mostly consistent. Relative humidity is very low. The mean annual precipitation is less than 10 centimeters in the lower basins, and greater than 76 centimeters on high mountain summits. A difference of more than 51 centimeters over a distance of a few kilometers is common. The hydrology of this region is dependent on the time of year. From April to June, there is snowmelt, which causes flooding. From November to March, there is rain on snow. And summer through fall, there are thunderstorms, catastrophic, and frequent flood events. There are also ephemeral streams, which are numerous, which have long periods of little to no flow and short periods of high discharge. Historically, the Great Basin was an inland drainage area with no sea access, the largest area of closed basins in North America. It's an area diverse in elevation levels, with mountainous peaks over 4,000 meters tall and low valleys below sea level. The images here are of Mount Whitney, which is 4,418 meters tall, and Death Valley, which is 75 meters below sea level. Soil distribution corresponds with geomorphic features. On mountain slopes, there are shallow to moderately deep residual soils and exposed bedrock. On the lower basins, there are surface horizons of loam to silty clay loam and subsoils of finer texture. The playas and lake beds have light-colored sediments with high salinity. The image is of the Bonneville salt flats in Utah, and as you can see, the sediments are light in color and salt is in the name. Most studies in this region are on lentic waters. This basically means standing fresh water. Closed basin lentic waters are influenced by a few important factors: temperature, precipitation, evaporation, which has a concentration of salts, and influent waters from streams and springs. The Great Salt Lake, which is a major lake in the Great Basin region, is a hypersaline system. Tributaries that lead into the lake are high in sodium and chloride. The concentration of sodium chloride in the lake itself is so high, other constituents within the lake cannot reach high concentrations. Evaporation during dry periods can even make the salt precipitate. Chemical composition is determined by waters that feed into lakes, constituents including carbonates, sodium, and chloride. Water sources include tributaries, streams, rivers, and groundwater. The most common soil types here are iridosols, endosols, and mollisols. The soil pictured here is an iridosol called Typic aquasalid in Nevada. There are variable pH and nutrient levels. Deer Creek Reservoir, for example, is very basic due to high alkalinity water from the Provo River in Utah. The streams feeding lakes in the Great Basin tend to be relatively high in nutrients like calcium and magnesium carbonates, and near neutral in pH. There is great variability in vegetation types and levels throughout this region. There are macroscopic algae like common stonewort, and vascular plants like saltgrass, which can tolerate high salinity. There are also species like basin wild rye, big sagebrush, and single-leaf pinyon that make up the various vegetative communities of the Great Basin. Major communities here include the shrub steppe, woodlands, and subalpine communities. The distribution of these communities is determined by environmental drivers such as hydrology, fire, and anthropogenic activity. There are many plant species that are threatened or endangered. Basin wild rye ecosystems, for example, have been severely degraded by fire suppression practices, overgrazing, conversion of land to agriculture, and non-native plants. In Great Basin National Park, this degradation is seen as wild rye communities being converted to non-native grasses and woody vegetation. In addition to vegetation, the Great Basin supports a variety of wildlife, all of which I could not include here. I've chosen to highlight a few examples of wildlife from major groups. The kokanee salmon is a landlocked sockeye salmon. They do not travel to the ocean. A common native crustacean is the pilose crayfish. The North American beaver is a keystone species that enhances habitat structural diversity through the creation of dams. Beavers will return in this presentation. The arrows show one food chain in this system. The brine fly is the only benthic macroinvertebrate of chemically extreme Great Basin lakes, like the Great Salt Lake, because they can tolerate the incredibly high salinity. They are very unique. These invertebrates get eaten by ducks and migratory birds, like Wilson's phalarope. Terrestrial animals hunt aquatic species and birds. Garter snakes, like the western terrestrial garter snake, are not picky. They eat many kinds of species. They will eat Wilson's phalarope and amphibians like the Great Basin spadefoot. These terrestrial animals are also a source of organic matter to aquatic habitats. This community provides key migration habitat for migrating waterfowl, like mallards, northern pintails, and the Wilson's phalarope discussed last slide. These habitats are also important for downstream ecosystems. Stream habitats, in particular, transfer organic matter through ecosystems. Dissolved, fine, and coarse particulate organic material flows through streams. The downstream ecosystem receives organic detritus from streamside vegetation that has been partially decomposed by aquatic invertebrates. Remember streamside vegetation because it's very important to these habitats. Moving on to anthropogenic impacts, hydrology, fire, and water quality environmental forcing functions have been altered by human activity. Increased flash flooding, altered water polluted by nutrients, salts, pesticides, and sediments, water diversion through draining, aquifer pumping, and irrigation, channel alterations and dams causing habitat loss, and in forest systems, fire exclusion results in increased evapotranspiration, resulting in soil water loss and decreased stream flow. Water quality especially is suffering, in large part due to livestock. Range animals group around water sites. The livestock prefer these zones for shade, more succulent vegetation, and drinking water. Unfortunately, these animals are a major disturbance to the ecosystem. The animals consume streamside vegetation, stir up sediments, and add excess nutrients to the water through their waste. They compact soil, reducing water infiltration and increasing surface runoff. This in turn increases erosion. Topsoil is eroded by wind and water and transported to streams, reducing water quality. These fine sediments alter fish habitat like spawning and rearing areas. This riparian stream-type rangeland is a critical habitat area for fish, and also the most abused rangeland type in the Great Basin, due to land management issues like overgrazing. Speaking of fish, many streams have lost vegetative cover because range animals eat the vegetation. Riparian zones tend to be more heavily grazed than upland zones. This vegetative cover loss increases water temperature in critical fish habitat. Streams are unable to support aquatic life to their full potential. Native fish populations, like trout, are severely reduced, and this is exacerbated by the introduction of competition and disease from exotic fish. There are also direct human impacts, such as dredging, groundwater pumping, and the extraction of oil shale, coal, and minerals, which have greatly impacted aquatic habitats. The diagram shows a dropping water table due to groundwater pumping in the Spring and Snake Valleys of Nevada and Utah. Some research is currently being done on human impacts and consequences in this region, but one issue with the Great Basin region is the lack of historic data. Not much is known about the state of these ecosystems before they were affected by anthropogenic activities, and this makes it difficult to determine exactly how much damage has been done and what has been lost. So, when it comes to restoring and protecting this region, scant historic data and increasing current research is a major challenge. Several hydrographic units have minimal information available, especially in the central basins. The processes that create riparian and stream habitats in this region are not well understood due to this lack of research. Another challenge is that the cattle population in this area is higher than ever, meaning improved rangeland management is crucial. This is especially true for riparian stream-type rangeland, the areas critical for endangered fish, and the areas most affected by livestock grazing. Finally, because the Great Basin is such a large, diverse region, with variable stream types and sizes, restoration efforts are complicated, but there is hope. Natural energy dissipators, like bends, vegetation, logs, boulders, and simulated structures, are placed in stream channels. Dissipator structures provide habitat for aquatic life. They decrease velocity, which mitigates downstream erosion and sedimentation, which is a focal point of rehabilitation efforts. They can increase, decrease, or redirect flows, which creates riffle pool areas that provide ecological services for aquatic life. The diagram shows baffle piers, a type of natural energy dissipator. These blocks are placed in basins and across basin floors to break the flow and dissipate energy. In southwest streams, fish and fish food production have increased due to stream improvements. In the Weber River, structures and channels assisted aquatic invertebrate recovery. This in turn increased fish recovery. Grazing alternative research is progressing understanding of stream and riparian habitat recovery. Also, research on beavers is showing promising results. Beaver dams can trap sediments, reduce stream velocities, elevate local water tables, and reduce water table fluctuations. When paired with livestock grazing management, this allows for reestablishment of riparian plants. This stabilizes stream banks, improving aquatic habitat. Potentially, beaver dams can be used to restore aquatic and riparian cold desert stream systems. More research needs to be done, but there are many people working very hard to protect and preserve the Great Basin stream and riparian communities. Thank you for watching my presentation.